Hi, my name is Charles here at JTech, and we're going to go over how to do an air brake system, the air system on this International. But it's a 6-test portion, and we're going to do the first test right now. First things first, always remember safety. So we're going to be letting a lot of air out of the vehicle, drain it to zero. We're going to be filling the vehicle all the way up. So we want to make sure the vehicle is chocked. We want to make sure that all of our safety, all of our people know what's going on. Make sure you're wearing your eye protection in case of an airline popping off or anything along those lines. So make sure you're wearing the proper safety equipment. So the first thing we need to do, we're going to go by the numbers here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to drain the air out of these tanks. Now if you look at the tanks, if you come in here, we've all got a drain valve. Alright? So this is a segmented tank, so there's one on each side of this tank and there's one on the other side of this one. So the first thing we need to do for this first test is to drain all the air from the tanks. And what that's going to do is when we turn the truck on, it's going to have the low pressure warning light's going to be on and the audible sound is going to be on. And we're going to test to see when that goes off. The pressure should build for about 60 psi when it goes off. And then it should build up and the governor should start everything off around about 120 psi. So we'll do this. We'll shoot by the numbers. So first thing, let's drain these tanks. The reason why this tank may take longer or as long as the second tank, the primary tank, even though it's segmented, is because of a check valve that's in there. It's a one-way check valve to not let air go back into the supply tank from the secondary tank, even though it's a segmented tank. So there may not be any air that comes out on our supply side, which is the other side of this tank. It sounds like it's empty. So we're going on the inside. That's the secondary tank. Then we're going to go underneath the truck and do the supply and the primary. As you can see, our supply tank is already empty. It's because it emptied into our secondary tank. So while you're down here and you're emptying out these tanks, you want to look for any water or condensation that comes out of the tank, or especially out of the wet tank or supply tank. It should have water coming out of it because that's where all the wet is going to accumulate. Also look for debris, rust. That'll tell us the state of the tank on the inside. So now we're going to go in, we're going to start the vehicle and listen for some of the warnings and the audible sounds. Okay, so now we're in the truck and we're going to look at the gauges. And if you look, our tanks are reading 0. That means there's no air in our tanks. That's what we want to do when we start up the truck. We want to make sure everything's at 0. So let's start up the truck. You're going to hear some loud noises. It's going through its checks. Here we go. So that beep, that's our audible sound for our air saying it's empty. So now we're going to build up the pressure up to 85 to 40 psi. Should be within 40 seconds at a high idle. That's our 80 PSI. Now it should reach 100 PSI within 40 seconds. It's trucking along pretty good. There's our 100. It's definitely within 40 seconds. Okay, the governor should cut off at around 125 to 130. There's one. That's probably a secondary tank. Maybe it was both. It's kind of hard to read these gauges. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the pressure and see when the governor cuts in. The difference between the cut in and the cut out shouldn't be more than 30 PSI. So now we're sitting at 120, 121, maybe 123 on the secondary. What we're gonna do, we're gonna use some services. We're gonna press the brake. We're going to just actuate some air. Get this thing to it's gonna be no more than 30 PSI. Yeah, there it goes, there it goes. Turn it off. So it was about 25 before it kicked in. We had to drop a lot more though. As you can see, we got our secondary tank, our needles raising again. Without at high idle. We hit high idle, it'll go a lot faster, but so that is test one. That's test one finished. Test two, we're going to check the stabilization. So we'll get this back up. We're going to turn off the vehicle. We're going to watch these gauges for 2 minutes. We cannot let it drop. It should not drop more than 4 PSI within that 2 minutes. 6 if you've got a trailer attached, 6 to 8. Or 2 trailers for 8, 6 for 1 trailer. Wait for this governor to kick back up. Alright, so I'm going to turn off the vehicle. I'm going to watch this drop. It should drop no more than 4 PSI. So we're sitting at, oh, it's at 123 maybe. So it shouldn't drop below 199. That's tank 1. There's like 125, so no more than 120 on the secondary tank. Here's our primary and there's our secondary. 2 minutes, just watching it. So what this tests is the how well the system, how well our supply tank is, and all of our fittings are going back to the supply tank. That's what we're checking right now. Also, the lines, the safety, the service relays, all those pieces that charge the system is what we're really checking, to making sure there's no major leaks. So we're looking at about 2 minutes, and we've dropped about 2 psi on our primary tank, and I would say we haven't dropped anything on our secondary tank. So test 2, it passes. Next, we're going to move on to test 3. We're going to do test 3 of this Bendex test. So this, we're checking, this is called the cuff test. What we're going to do is we're going to, at full pressure, we're going to release the parking brake, which means we're going to push in the push-pull valve. Then we're going to push the brake, and then, so make sure the vehicle's shocked because we're releasing the parking brake. So it will roll if it's not correct. Make sure safety first. Then we're going to push the brake and then turn the ignition on. We're going to listen to the vehicle do its checks on the air valves. You hear a cuff, 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 cuff. You'll hear it a couple times. What this does, it checks the valves on every single brake cylinder. So let's do this. So we got pushing the air, parking brake is released. All right, I'm going to turn the ignition. I'm going to turn it on. I'm not going to turn the vehicle. I'm not going to start the engine. So turn on. You hear them? All right. So that was the test 3, and that is testing all the valves. Now we're going to move on to test 4. Test 4 is the same thing. Only this time we're going to check. It's just like test 2, where we're going to push the brake in, and we're going to wait 2 minutes for release. But this time, everything's going to be. We're checking with the brake held. Before it was the pressure without anything held. Now we're actually going to press the parking brake. It should be the same. So it should be no more than 4 psi over 2 minutes with the brake held, the service brake held. So if you come on in here, look at the gauges again. All right, we're going to press the brake in 2 minutes. All right, that is 2 minutes. Now what this checks, this checks for any leaking on the service brake line. So it'd be loose lines, the trailer control valve. We would check if there was any leaking. We check the stoplight switch, the brake chamber diaphragms. If there was any leaking, this is what would be problems caused by these problems. Tractor protection valve, service brake release, dual brake valves, the relay valves, double check valves. So all of those pieces is what we're checking with that one test of holding that brake in for the service brake in for 2 minutes. So All right, so now we're going to move on. All right, so we're moving on to test 5. We brought the truck inside to do some visual inspections once we're done with the whole test. So test 5, what we're checking and making sure the push-pull valve works on this vehicle, that it works properly, which means when we push in the valve, it releases the brakes, so we can use the service brakes. And when we pull out the valve, it sets the parking brake. Now, since this is a disc brake truck, it's harder to actually check to make sure it's working because we don't have that visual push rod. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and move the truck with the brakes set. We shouldn't be able to move the truck at all. And if it does move, and they're broken, obviously, and then we're going to release the brakes and see if the truck moves just a couple inches. That shows that the brakes release properly. So to do this, we need to turn the vehicle on. So that's why I did all explain, because it's going to get loud. Pushing in to release the brake. Now the service, so the parking brake should be released. Try to move the truck. Good. So release the parking brake. Pull down the push-pull valve. Back the truck again. That's test 5. Now our last test, test 6, this test actually tests the foot valve, or the dual foot, the valve on the pedal. So what we're going to do is we're going to drain the secondary tank that controls the service brakes on the steering wheel. So we're going to come out here and we're actually going to drain this secondary tank. So again, on this system, the front tank is our wet tank and our secondary tank. So we're going to drain our secondary tank. All right, now we're going to go inside. We're going to verify the secondary tank is empty. So, because of the one-way check valve, we've actually emptied our supply tank and our secondary tank. So, keep that in mind. Let's go inside. And we can see that the secondary tank is empty. It's got a red light saying it's empty. It's empty. Let me turn these lights on so you can see it. There we go. So it is empty. So now we're going to apply the brake, and we're checking to make sure the valve moves the air from the primary tanks and applies it to the secondary system, which is the steering axle. Okay, so all the air is out of that secondary tank. The only way I know how to test this is have somebody push the truck and I make sure the vehicle can stop with just the air from the primary tank. So I'm going to have an assistant push the truck and I'm going to apply the brake. Go ahead and push the truck. We're moving. There we go. And if you listen, they only release the air from the back axles. So it's actually pushing all that air back. So it's actually moving forward and still releasing. So even though the secondary reservoir doesn't have air, it has pushed it to the front. So now we're going to do the exact opposite. Fill the secondary reservoir and drain the primary and see if this will work again. So, gotta turn the truck back up. Alright, now we're going to do the primary tank. The secondary tank is now full. We're going to drain the primary tank. So again, this is going to drain the primary tank and the wet tank. And the primary tank's bigger, so it's going to take longer. Keep in mind, if you don't have a cable connected to your valve, you have to get there with your hands. And if it's cold out, you could freeze your hands, so make sure you wear gloves. You go down to the actual valve. The primary tank is empty. We're going to go in and verify. If you come in, we've got our warning light and our tank is empty. Our secondary tank is full. So we're going to go out, we're going to push the truck again. Just to test to make sure that this valve is good. Brakes are released. Push truck. So again, you hear that cuff, and we have no air in the primary tank, which controls the rear axle on this vehicle. So the air is going through the valve from the secondary tank and applying the brakes on the rear axle. So we know that that works. All right, we'll charge this back up. That's it for the tests. But even if all your tests pass, go through your air system, checking all your lines and all your fittings, making sure there's no kinks. Just because it passes doesn't mean that you don't have a kinked line or something cutting something off. It just means that, well, it'll work, but it doesn't mean that there's not actually a problem. So make sure you always go through and do a visual inspection of all your air lines. That's all I have. Hopefully you learned something. And remember, when you're doing these tests, go by the book and go by the numbers. Thank you.